I want to talk about the difference between the UK and the US because I've spent my past 10 years in both countries, and you might think that they both speak English, but if you're a company who's selling into both markets, or if you're deciding which one you want to sell to, you want to be aware that they're quite different. Okay. And I think the number one thing is culture. Like, what are they really saying and what they really mean could be different. Okay. Like in the UK, people can speak, in understatement and irony. For example, like in Britain, not everything said is meant like literally. Sometimes, understatement and irony are quite typical. And sometimes, people say that's interesting, right? And it could signal that it's either genuine interest or a polite, brush off. Okay. Another example is like rather disorganized. Usually means that it was actually chaotic. But in the US, it's more literal. Okay, like the American culture really values being frank, being direct, and optimistically communicate if you are a business. If a British says that, well, think about it, that means it's probably a no. Whereas if an American says, something looks really good, just send me the pricing, let's do the quote, that usually just means yes. Or they just tell you, hey, we don't think this is going to work. We don't think we're going to buy anything from you. Then it's not going to work. So I would say this is something that most companies who are selling to these markets would misread from the language that is embedded very much into their cultures. And the second point is about behaviors, right? Like how do you negotiate something? So for example, if you're selling to an American, you can actually push them to close a deal with you. Okay, like it's fine to push an American because in America, negotiators are typically given the authority to decide on the spot, and they appreciate pragmatism a lot because they want to avoid wasted time and they want to drive the deal to make things happen. Okay. Whereas if you push a Brit to close a deal, you could just be read as being very pushy. Okay. Because in the UK, negotiators can be more, understated and mannered. All right. Things could happen a little slower, so it cannot be rushed. And I think it's very much related to the cultures in both countries. Socially, the Brits like to put sarcasm on themselves, right? They can make some, they build trust actually through some dry, self-deprecating humor sometimes, right? That's why you always hear about the British humor. And a hard sell could be difficult. I think that's somewhat closer to the East Asian culture, which is let's humble ourselves a little bit. And the British just, bring it to the next level, which is let's humble ourselves and make fun of ourselves. All right, so that you don't sound over-exaggerated or aggressive in your sales tactics. But if you're selling to Americans, passion, enthusiasm, confidence, these things matter a lot more. I travel around to a lot of local businesses in the US, especially some factories and manufacturing businesses. And when I go up and talk to them, I literally just walk in. I talk to the security, and I talk to the business owners with a few message exchange online, and they know who I am. I'm just around in the city. Let me just get in, have a chat with them. But if they say no, I don't go in. I can go back. Okay, and then these kind of things work. All right, in America, this works. I doubt that will work in the UK, but if you're a company in the UK who likes this kind of style, let's chat. Let's talk about it. Okay. My last point is probably not gonna be a consensus. I feel like in the UK, I have met a lot more very international people. What I mean by that is that you can meet people from mainland Europe, from Africa, from the Middle East, from the eastern part of Asia, South Asia, the American continents, from Australia. You meet people from everywhere, okay? And then most people talk in their own accents, speak their own language, and then you just find out that people are so different, and people are very separated, in my opinion. So if you walk around the street in London, you just find out like you feel like this is a United Nation. Okay, people might argue that in New York City, it's very similar. Okay, I agree with that. But if you have spent some time in the US, you would realize that the cultural melting pot in the US means that you have to be American. You have to sound like an American, talk like an American, behave like an American. And there's Asian American, African American, other types of Americans, but you have to be American. So I think when it comes to business, it's expected that a Nigerian business or Indian business is just coming up to you and talk to you in the UK. You wouldn't expect them to be like, oh, you have to be British in order to talk to me. So I'm not too sure if that translates into how you should do business when it comes to cultural differences. But I think this is something interesting to keep in mind with, because if you are in the US, behaving or mimicking how an American sound and talk and behave sometimes could help, right? Whereas obviously in the UK, if you sound like British, it helps too. But I feel like in London, it's more common to see, people just be who they are, and you can clearly tell that they're not from the UK, and people are fine with that, and they're fine with that too. Okay, and I actually like that. I like the true multicultural part in London because that makes you feel at home. You don't need to be someone else. Okay. But yeah, anyways, these are just some stuff that I think could be helpful if you are a company selling overseas, especially targeting the UK and the US market. And our own company is also based in the UK and the US, and most of our clients are basically also struggling to sell into these two markets, and that's why we're trying our best to share our knowledge and help them. All right, if you're interested, you can click into my profile and check out our website, automanus.io. Cheers.